Tailscale integration directly into the server. Okay, so I'm going to go across here onto my backup server, which I call Imperial Walker. And I'm going to log in. Now, the first thing to do is just check that you don't have the Docker container version of Tailscale installed. If you do, then just make sure to remove that because we won't be needing it anymore. And so with that removed, I'm going to go to the Apps tab here. And you guessed it, I'm going to search for Tailscale. So what we're looking for here is the Tailscale plugin here. We can see the official Unraid one, which is also the monthly spotlight. So I'm going to click on to install here and download and install a container. Okay, so with the plugin installed, we just need to go across to settings here. And here now we can see there's a new icon under network services. Here's our Tailscale plugin. So if I click onto this now, that brings us to a page where it says re-authenticate. Now it says re-authenticate, but we are in fact only authenticating for the first time. But let's click onto this. And then now with Tailscale, we need to sign in with one of these providers. Now I'm going to use Google here, and I'm going to use this email address here, specially set up for doing this video. So I'm going to click onto next here and pop in my password. And so now when I click onto connect, that's going to connect my Unraid server here onto my Tailnet. So let's do that. And I'm going to click here to visit the console. Okay, so here we can see my server, Imperial Walker, and here we can see the various different ways that we can connect to it. So it's got its own IP address here, and also we can see it's got the name here, Imperial Walker, and then my Tailnet address here. Now, one thing I'd suggest to do is let's change the actual Tailnet to something a bit more fun. Now let's go across here to DNS. And here I can rename the Tailnet, because really Taylor 36d8b.ts.net, well, pretty boring. So let's rename it. So it's always best to do this right at the beginning, because if you rename your Tailnet later on, well, it could cause you issues to things that are already set up. So that's why I suggest you do this first. So I'm going to click I understand here, and then it gives us a few different options that we can choose. Now, I don't really like any of those, so I'm going to click Reroll Options. And again, I'm going to click Reroll. And I don't know, I'm going to go for Fox Garibaldi here. So I'm going to click Rename Tailnet. And now we can see my Tailnet is renamed. Now, if I go back to Machines now, and I look here, we can see here now it's imperialwalker.fox-garibaldi.ts.net. Now, I can't actually access any of these things at the moment, because I don't have Tailscale installed on my Mac. So we're going to need to do that. So now I want to add my Mac. So at the top here, we can see download. So I'm going to click there. And here we can choose the OS that we're using. So I'm going to click download Tailscale for Mac. Okay, so it's pretty easy to install. Just install for whatever OS you need. And again, you're going to need to do very similar to what we did on the Unraid server by just signing in with the same credentials as we did before. And you can see here I'm connecting my Mac to the same Tailnet. So now we can see both machines are in my Tailnet. Now there's one thing you can do. I don't really like the name of this here. So if I click onto it and I go to machine settings here, I can edit the machine name. So instead of having it auto-generate from the OS host name, I'm going to uncheck that here. And I'm just going to call it MacBook Pro. So now both machines are here. And so let's have a look here now. If I grab this IP address and I paste that into a browser window, and this will bring me across to my Unraid server. Now this would work from anywhere I am in the world with this IP address. And it would just be the same username and password that I'd normally use to log into the server. So next, if we go back to machines here, and I'm going to grab this name here, the Imperial Walker.fox-Garibaldi. Let's pop this in here. So we can see this is a domain name. So if I click enter, again, that brings us straight the way through. Now, one thing to notice is currently you'll see here that it says not secure. That's because we don't yet have an SSL certificate, but we'll worry about that later. Now let's go back to the settings page here and go back to Tailscale. And here we can see various things about this device on our tailnet. Here we can see it says the Tailscale key will expire here for me in 183 days. I'm logged in with dragontailscale@gmail.com and I'm currently viewing. Here I can see the various different ways I can connect to this server. We can see here it says this is not an exit node. Here, if I click View Device Details, you can see a little bit more information about this device in Tailscale. And here under Subnet Router, if I click here, we can see that there's no actual routes being displayed. So also finally here, Tailscale SSH server, we can see that that's not running here. Now, the first thing we'll do on this page is it says here the key's going to expire. Now, I'd really recommend that we make it so keys, they don't expire on devices that we permanently have connected to the tailnet. It's good to have keys to expire on things you might give to guests when you share things out, and we'll talk about more about sharing things in a moment. But devices that are permanently connected, it's best to have the key to never expire. So to do that, we need to go back across to our tailnet on the Tailscale website here. And you can see I've actually added another server behind the scenes here. We'll have a look at that at the moment. But here's Imperial Walker. So what I want to do is click on the three dots here, and I'm going to click on here, Disable Key Expiry. And I'm going to do that to this other server here called Andromeda. I'm going to disable the key on that, and also my MacBook Pro. So now none of these will actually expire. And if we go back to the page here, and I refresh this page, we can see here it doesn't say the key's going to expire. Now, earlier on I mentioned about subnet routing, which basically means we can actually access things on our local LAN here in the house or wherever our server's running on devices that we have connected to our tailnet. Now here, if I click onto this, you can see it says not advertising any routes. So here where it says viewing now, I can click onto this, and then if I click here, sign in to confirm identity. In fact, because I'm already signed into Tailscale, I didn't have to put in my username and password. If you weren't signed in, you would have to. And here, now if I click onto Subnet Router here, I can advertise a new route. Now, I'm never sure whether to say Subnet Router, which we say here in the UK, or Subnet Router, because I thought you guys in the States, you call it a router. So I've kind of started saying that. But then a friend of mine over in the States who's a boat builder says when I say router, he thinks of a machine in a shop. So I don't know. Excuse me if I'm saying it wrong. Anyway, so what we can do here is we can put in a subnet. So for me, my subnet is 10.10.20.0/24. So I'll explain what that is. My server, its normal IP address is 10.10.20.199. So to kind of write a subnet in what's called a CIDR, yep, like the drink, we just put the last number on the end as a 0, then /24. That gives us every IP in between 1 and 254. So if I click Advertise Routes here, we can see here that we're wanting to be able to have Tailscale through my server here, be able to give devices access to anything on this subnet here. Now, a lot of people, you might have something like 192.168.0.0/24. So there's one kind of caveat here is if you're in a coffee shop and you wanted to access something on your home LAN that's on 192.168.0.1, say you want to access your router at home, yeah? So if you're in a coffee shop and their router is also on 192.168.0.1 and you're in the coffee shop, how does it know which one you want to actually access? Because there's going to be two lots of 192.168.0 and whatever number on the end, yeah? So I always recommend on your home network, have an obscure subnet. That's why I use 10.10.20.0/24, because I'm never going to go to a coffee shop, an airport. They're not going to have that same subnet range. So it always just means that I can connect back to my subnet and it won't clash with the subnet I'm connecting from. I hope that makes sense, but it's just something to think about. Now I'm going to click stop advertising on this one here, because that's not a subnet for me at home. But you can see here it says pending approval. So underneath here, to approve route, we need to go to the admin console. So I can just click here. And here under subnets, we can see here it says waiting approval. So I'm going to click here on review. I'm going to check this one and I'm going to click save. And so now if we go back to the Unraid server here, we can see it says this route's approved now. So that's all good. And here we can see under subnet router, it says there's one route that's been approved. Okay, we'll talk about the Tailscale SSH server in a moment. But as you saw a moment ago, I have added this server here called Andromeda. Now, this is a server that I have in a data center over in Finland, so it's a long way away. So anyway, let's connect to this server here. So I'm going to grab its IP address, open a new tab, and just paste the address in here, and just log in. Now, the first thing I'm going to look at is I'm using Unraid Connect on this server here, and I've got a little error message here. So here we got what's called a cause error. And so what I need to do is I need to add the Tailscale IP here. So let's copy that onto the clipboard and click here to go to Connect Settings. And here we've got Unraid API Extra Origins. So I'm going to paste in the Tailscale IP address here and click Apply. And now if we go back, we can see it's gone. So just a little thing, but yep, worth doing. Now I'm going to go here to Settings and I'm going to go to Tailscale. So exactly the same as the other server, except I'm not exposing any subnet routes, and we can see the key is not set to expire. Now, what I want to show you here is we're going to set up what's called an exit node. So that will allow me at home to actually route my traffic through this server over in Finland. Now, I'm going to open up a terminal window here just to show you something. And I'm going to check my IP address. So to do that, I can type curl ifconfig.io. Now, if I hit enter here, it will give my public IP address. I don't really want this online, so I'm going to put / here, then country_code. And now if I hit enter here, it's going to tell me basically the country code of where the IP address is from. So you can see here FI for Finland. So let's close this now. Okay, to set up an exit node, it's super easy. Now at the moment here, you can see that we can't actually do anything. So that's because we're on viewing mode again. So if I click onto here and then click sign in to confirm identity, it will ask me to sign in and then we'll get some additional options. So you can see here that I'm signed in. And so now you can see here under exit node, I can click this little arrow and I can click here, run as exit node. So I'm going to do that. And now we can see we're running as an exit node and we've got a button here to disable it if we wanted to cancel this. But we can see here it's pending approval. Just in the same way as earlier when we did subnet routing, we need to actually approve this in the Tailscale actual web UI itself. Let's go to the Tailscale website here. And here we can see it says that Andromeda, it's running as an exit node. So let's click onto it. And here under routing settings here, we can see awaiting approval. So let's just click edit. And I'm going to check here, use as exit node, and I'm going to click on to save. Okay, so that's all done. So now my server here over in Finland, we can see it says it's running as an exit node. So now whenever I want to, I can route all of my internet traffic through Finland out through this Unraid server. Okay, so now let's test that. Let's go on to my Mac. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a terminal window And again here, I'm going to type curl ifconfig.io/country_code. So this will tell us our country code for where our internet is currently. And we can see here it says GB, which is the UK, Great Britain. Okay, so let's minimize this now. And here at the top, here is my Tailscale icon on the Mac. And here we can see my network devices, the other ones here, Andromeda and Imperial Walker. Well, Andromeda is the server in the data center. So what I can do here is on exit nodes, I can actually choose the exit node to be Andromeda. So I'm going to click onto that. And we can see a little arrow here on the Tailscale icon. I'll try and zoom in on that, but it's pretty small. Hopefully you'll be able to see it. So now let's open up the terminal window again and run the same command. And there we are. Our internet is now going through Finland. So now if I was to open up a browser, well, I'd get a whole load of language that I don't understand and a whole load of adverts that are all from a different region. So basically a really useful feature, great for getting around geo-locked applications. So you might want to do some online banking while you're abroad. Well, it's going to look like it's coming straight from the IP address of your house. So absolutely perfect. And also you might want to watch a streaming service that you pay for at home that you can't watch abroad, but obviously because you're routing it straight through your home IP, it's going to work absolutely fine. Okay, so that's exit nodes. So now let's have a think about Tailscale SSH. Now on the server Andromeda in the data center, we can see this isn't running. Now let's go back across here to the main server in the UK, and I'm going to open up a terminal window. So obviously I can SSH in the normal way to that Unraid server just using the standard Tailscale IP. And it's going to ask me to put in the password because I'm going to need credentials. Okay, we got a couple of errors there, nothing to worry about, but we can see now we're logged in via SSH into Andromeda. So let's actually exit this now and log out. Now, yes, we could exchange SSH keys with this server in the normal way that we would, but we're not going to do that. We're going to use the Tailscale SSH server. So let's go back across to Andromeda here, and we can see it says the Tailscale SSH server is not running. So I'm going to click on viewing here, and I'm going to sign in, and I need to open up this pop-up window. It's been blocked by Safari. And now if I click on Tailscale SSH server, now I'm actually authenticated, I can toggle this here and I can click run Tailscale SSH server. Okay, so let's go back to the main server in the UK and open up a terminal window again. Now let's run the same command, just SSH, then the username, which for Unraid is root, then the Tailscale IP. So now if I hit enter, we can see here it says Tailscale requires an additional check, and it gives us a URL to actually go to where we can sort this out. So I'm going to click onto that link, and it says that authorization successful. And now here on Andromeda, we can see that SSH is enabled. Okay, so now we can see that we're logged in via SSH into Andromeda. So let's exit that, and let's run the same command again. And we can see we can SSH directly into the server without having to have any SSH keys exchanged or without having to put a password in. So let's try exactly the same from the Mac. Let's copy this command here and open a terminal window on the Mac here. So this is the MacBook. So I'm going to again just SSH in from here. And because the Mac is on my tailnet, I'll be able to get in without a password. It's going to ask me if I want to continue. I'm just going to click yes. But we can see here I'm straight in without a password. Now if I exit, and let's clear the screen. Now if we run the command again, we're straight in. So that's a really useful feature in my opinion, to be able to do SSH between two machines, not having to do any SSH key exchange and doing it passwordless. So why would we want to be able to do this? Well, let's have a little example. Let's have a look on my server here in the UK. I've got this share here called test. If we have a look inside, there's a picture of my old lovely dog there before she passed away. If we go across to Andromeda here, you'll see I've got the same share here. There's currently got nothing inside. So if I go across to the UK server here, I'm going to open a terminal window. Now you'd probably want to script this. We'll just put this in as a command. What we can do is we can easily actually back up that share using Rsync over the Tailscale network using SSH without any key exchange or without any passwords. So let's hit enter. Okay, so we can see that file's been sent across. So let's go back across to the server in Finland here. And we can see here the picture of lovely Mia has been transferred and backed up over onto my server in Finland. So really useful being able to use Rsync over the Tailscale SSH, in my opinion. Now, I really want to start talking about Docker integration with Tailscale on Unraid, but there's still a few things about the Tailscale integration on the actual server that I want to talk about first. So let's go back across to the UK server here, and let's go to settings and back to the Tailscale icon here. So we can see here along the top, we've got various tabs. So the first tab here is settings. Now, for most people, we don't need to touch anything here. Now, it's recommended on the Tailscale outbound networking that we leave use subnets and Tailscale DNS, we leave these settings to no. It only affects outbound network traffic, nothing actually coming into the server. Now, a couple of things here. We can actually restart the Tailscale service by clicking this button. And if we wanted to erase the configuration, say we wanted to join a different tailnet maybe, we can erase the configuration here and reset everything back to defaults. Okay, so let's have a look at the next tab here. I think this is a very interesting tab, the status tab here. Now we can see there's three things I've got here on this tailnet. So I'm currently on the MacBook Pro making this video, and obviously we can see it's a direct connection. Now I have another server here. This is just a Ubuntu server in a data center in the UK. Now I can ping this here. And doing that, we can see that this is also a direct connection, not going through any relay, straight to that server in that data center. And here we can see its IP address. So this is the public IP address of that Ubuntu server. But for my Mac, because it's on the same network as what Imperial Walker is, we see the connection is direct over the LAN. So the IP address of the Mac is 10.10.20.186. So we see that IP here. Now, if I ping Andromeda, the server in the Hetsna data center in Finland, so here now we can see that a direct connection couldn't be established. And we can see the connection type is a relay. Now, I've got the firewall very strict over in the Hetsna data center in Finland, so that's why it's going through a relay. So we can see these two are direct, this is a relay. So instead of seeing an IP address here, we actually see the actual relay that's being used to make this connection. And AMS, I think that stands for Amsterdam. So basically, my traffic is being relayed through the DERP server in Amsterdam across to Finland for me to connect to this server. So I think this is really useful to be able to have a look and analyze your tailnet, see what's going on. Okay, so let's move on to the next tab here, this one called lock. Now, Tailscale lock, what actually is this? Well, to explain that, I'm going to go here onto the Tailscale website. Now, before going into this, I just want to explain, for 99% of us, we don't actually need to worry about this. It does make things much more complicated, and for most of us, we don't need to worry about it. But just to be complete, I wanted to explain what it is. Okay, so normally when we add a device, as you've seen earlier, all we need to do is log into the actual Tailscale website. For me, using my Gmail account here, dragontailscale@gmail.com, with my really strong password, and also I use two-factor authentication. But what would happen if someone actually was able to access this page? Well, they could actually add a rogue node to my tailnet. And with that rogue node, they could then probably access various machines on my tailnet. Now, it's pretty unlikely if you have really good security, you use strong passwords and 2FA, but if you wanted the very best security, and maybe you're running a business or something, well, you might want to enable the Tailnet lock. So to do that, you go across to settings here, and you go to device management. Now here, you'd enable Tailnet lock. Now, what happens with Tailnet lock is we add something called signing nodes. Now, these signing nodes, we add them from the existing devices on our Tailnet. And then when a new device is added, it has to basically be approved via that signing node that's on our Tailnet. So it means that things can't actually be added, even if people can access the actual Tailscale website. So it basically locks everything down for adding new nodes. Now, probably for most of us Unraiders, this is kind of overly complex, and it does have a downside. If you don't have access basically to the signing nodes, then you can't add new devices, and you get given what's called a disablement secret, which is the only way you can actually turn this off after it's been enabled. So if you lose that secret, you can't turn it off, and you can pretty much just lock yourself out of the system. So if you want the best security, add it. If you're a business, add it. But me personally, I don't bother with Tailscale lock. I'm just happy with a strong password and 2FA. But that's what Tailscale lock is. Okay, the next tab, let's go on to info here. Basically, info just about this node, which is Imperial Walker here. Just tells me a bit of info about it. Help, obviously, just a help page. And log, that's the Tailscale into individual Docker containers. So I'll see you there.